Good Tuesday morning, Patriots, and welcome back to O'Connor's Right Stand. I'm your host, John O'Connor, software developer by day, conservative truth warrior by night. I'm coming to you with another edition of the truth they just simply don't want you to hear. Today, we're doing a new first for the podcast. We're looking across the pond at something that should absolutely terrify every red-blooded American. Because what's happening in the United Kingdom right now is a preview of what the radical left wants to bring to our shores. But first, I hope everyone had a great weekend and really got to enjoy your Labor Day. The fiancé and I went to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. This was the historic haunted jail that I was supposed to visit 2 weeks ago, but unfortunately both my fiancé and I got sick. Pulling up at the penitentiary, it was shocking. Even awe-inspiring. Amongst a valley surrounded by 3 tall mountains, it looked like I was pulling up at the location used in the movie Shawshank Redemption. I mentioned to my fiancé, could you imagine being a prisoner? How soul-crushing this would have been to pull up to, almost guaranteeing no escape as you were trapped in by 3 sides of steep, rocky mountain. Brushy, that's the nickname they used for it, first opened in 1896 as a wooden jail, and then was rebuilt in the 1930s as a stone and concrete structure. This jail housed the absolute worst of Tennessee's criminals. The most famous was James Earl Ray, who supposedly killed Martin Luther King. Now I say supposedly, as there was some speculation in the late 90s and early 2000s that another individual named Jowers actually did it. If you don't know the complete history, look up some information on it. Who knows? I may do an entire episode on this, as I honestly find it quite interesting. There were also some horrific murders. Most notably to me was the man who bled out after having a meat cleaver sliced through his spine in the cafeteria that you actually get to walk through. Or there was the beheading of a hostage held in a cave nearby, where the prisoners were forced to work in digging out coal 12 hours a day, towards the beginning of the prison's existence. Anyways, I was in a camera-happy mode and took about 100 photos. There are some exciting pictures, and I took a picture of every infographic on the grounds. So if this interests you, just go to my X account at O'Connor Stand and look for my post from Sunday. All the photos are there. Now, let's jump into today's topic. Picture this. Citizens in England are being treated like criminals for flying their own country's flag. Local government officials are racing through streets with ladders cutting down Union Jacks and St. George crosses like they're removing hazmat. Meanwhile, these same officials allowed Palestinian flags to fly for nearly a year without so much as a raised eyebrow. This isn't just bureaucratic incompetence. This is ideological warfare against the very concept of national identity. If they can do this in Britain, what do you think they're planning for America? Today, we're diving deep into Operation Raise the Colors, a grassroots movement of British patriots who've decided that enough is enough. We'll explore how flying your own flag became an act of rebellion, why left-wing councils are so terrified of national symbols, and what this tells us about the globalist assault on Western civilization. Ready to see how quickly a nation can be turned against itself? The Right Stand starts now. Starting in August, British citizens began organizing through social media to launch Operation Raise the Colors, a coordinated effort to display Union Jacks and St. George crosses throughout their communities. What started in Birmingham quickly spread to Manchester, Newcastle, Norwich, Bradford, London, and dozens of other cities across England. These aren't professional activists. These are ordinary working-class Brits who decided they were tired of seeing every flag except their own flying in their neighborhoods. The movement involved tying flags to lampposts, painting St. George crosses on roundabouts, and displaying banners from bridges in public spaces. The organizers raised over £20,000 through crowdfunding to buy flags, poles, and cable ties. Groups like the Waioli Warriors in Birmingham describe themselves as a group of proud English men, with over 2,000 members intent on showing that their country is not lost. But here's where it gets infuriating. Several local councils immediately began removing these flags, citing safety concerns, and claiming they were attached to council infrastructure without permission. Think about the absurdity of this. In a country where you can fly Palestinian flags, Ukrainian flags, pride flags without interference, suddenly flying your own national flag becomes a safety hazard requiring immediate government intervention? Tower Hamlets Council promised to remove British flags as soon as possible, while Palestinian flags had been flying in the same borough for months following October 7th without any official concern for public safety. This is what manufactured outrage looks like when it's turned against the patriotism itself. Let me paint you a picture of just how blatant this double standard has become. Because the hypocrisy is so stark, it would be comical if it weren't so dangerous. In Birmingham, the Labour-run council declared that Union flags pose safety risks and ordered their immediate removal, while simultaneously lighting up the city library in the colors of Pakistan and India to celebrate their independence days. The same council that couldn't find time to remove Palestinian flags that had begun flying since October of 2023. A leaked email revealed that Birmingham County Council officials were too scared to take down Palestinian flags without police protection, but apparently had no such concerns about confronting British citizens displaying their own flags. In Tower Hamlets, the Aspire Party-led council moved aggressively to remove British flags while Palestinian flags had flown for months without intervention. The Palestinian flags were only removed after UK lawyers for Israel argued their display constituted criminal offenses, and even then, the removal came reluctantly. Here's what this tells us. These officials understand perfectly well that flags are political statements. They know that symbols matter. They just believe that every political statement deserves protection except British patriotism. The message couldn't be clearer. You can express solidarity with any cause on earth as long as it's not love for the country you actually live in. The anti-racist campaign group Hope Not Hate immediately branded Operation Raise the Colors as a far-right movement, claiming it was organized by well-known far-right extremists and allies of Tommy Robinson. Notice the playbook. Any expression of national pride must be immediately associated with extremism. Seems oddly familiar. A YouGov survey found that 57% of Britons had a favorable view of flying the St. George's Cross, but 27% found flying the English flag unfavorable. An earlier survey found that almost a quarter of English respondents considered their flag to be racist. This isn't accidental. This is the result of decades of cultural programming designed to make people ashamed of their own identity. The Guardian warned that the campaign may offer cover for far-right agendas. When a St. George's Cross was painted on a church wall in Lincoln, the vicar saw that as an attempt to intimidate the diverse local community. A vicar, supposedly a representative of British Christian tradition, viewing the flag as intimidation. Meanwhile, the debate went global when Elon Musk posted a picture of the flag on X, and Vice President J.D. Vance urged people to push back against the crazies who criticize flying the flag. American leaders are having to defend British patriots because British leaders won't. Black academic K.I. Andrews called the St. George Cross a clear symbol of racism, claiming it represents that Britishness, Englishness, is white. This is the intellectual justification for national self-hatred. The idea that any symbol of Western identity is inherently exclusionary and therefore evil. Step back and look at what's really happening here. Because this flag controversy is just the surface manifestation of a much deeper ideological war. The same war being waged against American patriotism. As one observer noted, until a few weeks ago, you were more likely to see a Palestinian, Ukrainian, or LGBT pride flag flying in London than to see any of the UK's own colours. This is the globalist vision in action, a world where every identity is celebrated except the one that built the civilization you're living in. Birmingham's Labour-run council claimed flags fixed to lampposts 25 feet in the air put the lives of motorists and pedestrians at risk, while allowing Palestinian flags to fly unhindered in the same locations. This is manufactured justification for predetermined policy. Think about the psychology here. These officials live in Britain, work for British institutions, are paid by British taxpayers, and took oaths to serve British citizens. Yet, they view displays of British identity as threatening. That's not policy disagreement, that's cultural revolution from within. As Tom Slater at Spike magazine observed, a nation in which hoisting the national flag has become somewhere between a provocation and an act of resistance probably isn't in rude health. When patriotism becomes rebellion, you're not dealing with political disagreement. You're dealing with regime change. The same forces that have convinced British elites that their own flag is racist are working overtime here in America. They want our children to be ashamed of the stars and stripes. They want July 4th to become a day of national guilt rather than celebration. Here's why every American needs to pay attention to what's happening in Britain. Because the same playbook is being used against us right here at home. The dispute over flags has been described as echoing MAGA-like culture wars across the pond, and I quote, with Reform UK and Nigel Farage invoking Trump-style populism to rally Englishmen. The global left views American patriotism and British patriotism as the same threat to their vision of managed decline. A YouGov poll showed Reform UK would be Britain's largest political party if an election were held today, and Farage has hailed Trump's victory as an inspiration. The populist wave that gave us Trump is spreading worldwide, and the establishment is terrified. But look at what they're doing to counter it. Instead of addressing the legitimate concerns of citizens who love their country, they're demonizing patriotism itself. They're making it socially unacceptable to take pride in your own nation's achievements while demanding you celebrate everyone else's. This is the same strategy that they're using here. They want American flags removed from classrooms because they might make illegal immigrants feel unwelcome. They want the Pledge of Allegiance removed because it's divisive. They want Mount Rushmore destroyed because it represents white supremacy. The pattern is identical because the ideology is identical. Global progressivism cannot tolerate strong national identities because they interfere with the managed dissolution of Western civilization. But here's the beautiful part of this story. The British people aren't backing down, and their resistance is inspiring patriots worldwide. The flags go back up almost immediately, as quickly as the council can take them down, with activists playing whack-a-mole with hostile local authorities for the right to hang their national colors. The movement has spread beyond England to Scotland, Wales, and even Ireland, with citizens across the British Isles refusing to be ashamed of their heritage. Joseph Moulton, one of the organizers, told GB News, "The social contract's broken. People want a cause, while dealing with completely out-of-touch councils." He encourages people to use flagging as a gateway to actually build communities, doing the litter picking, helping the food banks, looking after vulnerable people, the duties being abandoned by their representatives. This is what real grassroots organizing looks like. Not astroturf movements funded by billionaire foundations, but working people spending their own money to defend their own culture in their own neighborhoods. The political establishment is caught in an impossible position. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's spokesperson had to acknowledge that he recognizes people's frustration regarding illegal immigration, while trying to balance not looking hostile to patriotism itself. When displaying your own flag puts the government in an awkward bind, you know the system is broken. What's happening in Britain isn't isolated. It's part of a coordinated assault on Western identity happening across Europe and North America. The movement has inspired similar actions in Germany, with Germans proudly raising the German flag and declaring, "We are healing from an unjustified guilt." Irish patriots have started raising Irish flags in Dublin in protest after politicians and journalists suggested that the flag was racist and made immigrants feel uncomfortable. Think about that. In Ireland, the historic symbol of independence from British rule is now being called racist by the very people who benefit from independence. The Irish flag, which represented resistance to foreign domination, is now considered offensive to foreign immigrants. You can't make this stuff up. This is the globalist endgame in action. They don't want strong nations with distinct identities and loyal citizens. They want economic zones with interchangeable consumers who have no loyalty to anything except the global marketplace. Elon Musk's support for the British flag movement and J.D. Vance's encouragement shows that American leaders understand this is part of a global struggle. The Trump administration recognizes that American nationalism and British nationalism are fighting the same enemy. Every American who loves this country needs to understand what's happening in Britain because it's a preview of what the global left has planned for us. First, they normalize the idea that patriotism is extremism. They make displaying your own flag controversial while celebrating every other flag. They teach your children that the American history is a story of oppression rather than liberation. Second, they capture institutions and use them to enforce cultural revolution. Local governments, school boards, corporate HR departments, they turn the machinery of civil society against the people it's supposed to serve. Third, they manufacture crises to justify their policies, then attack anyone who objects as extremism. Mass immigration creates social tension, then they blame the tension on racism rather than immigration policy. But here's what the British patriots are showing us. Resistance works. When ordinary people organize and refuse to accept cultural surrender, the establishment panics. We need to fly our flag proudly and often. We need to teach our children American history without apology. We need to demand that American institutions serve American interests. And we need to reject the guilt-mongering that says that loving America makes you a bigot. Step back and see this British flag controversy for what it really is. A test of whether free people will accept being ruled by those who hate them. It should never be controversial to fly your own country's flag, and taking pride in where you come from should not be a privilege afforded only to those from certain approved non-Western cultures. But we're witnessing exactly that. A system where every form of identity is celebrated except the one that built the civilization everyone wants to live in. Palestinian flags fly for months without intervention, but British flags must be removed immediately for safety reasons. The establishment's panic reveals their weakness. If they were confident in their vision for Britain, they wouldn't be terrified of British symbols. If they were proud of what they built, they'd welcome comparison with what came before. This is patriotism, a devotion to something that is always changing and yet is felt to be mystically the same. It is a bridge between the future and the past. The globalists want to burn that bridge, but the patriots are rebuilding it one flag at a time. American patriots need to learn from our British cousins. When you love your country more than your fear, being called names, amazing things become possible. The British flag controversy isn't really about flags. It's about whether nations have the right to exist as distinct entities with their own cultures, histories, and loyalties. Operation Raise the Colors has shown that patriotism is sweeping Britain at an unprecedented rate, and the panic of the establishment proves they know their time is running out. You can't rule people who refuse to be ashamed of who they are. Here in America, we can defend our symbols before they're banned, protect our institutions before they're captured, and teach our children to love America before they're taught to hate it. The British patriots hanging flags on lampposts are fighting the same fight as American parents challenging woke school boards. We are all part of the same movement. Free people defending free civilization. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of O'Connor's Right Stand. If this helped you understand what's really at stake in the global fight for Western civilization, share with someone who needs to hear the truth. Add me on X and like or subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform. It really does help me out. And remember, when flying your own flag becomes an act of rebellion, it's time for more rebellion, not fewer flags. The British are showing us the way forward. I'm reminding you that patriotism is not extremism. Surrender is. Keep flying those colors. Keep holding the line. Until next time, Patriots, this is John O'Connor, signing off.